Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So nice to meet you all in 2021. How has this year been for you so far? Let me know in the comments. You know, we always start the show with a trivia question, and here's an easy one for you today. What pizza was invented in Canada? Let me repeat that. What pizza was invented in Canada? Let me know the answer in the comments below. You can also share this image and your answer on Instagram with the hashtag CELPIP and we may feature it on our feed. I will reveal the response towards the end of our video, end of our segment. Let's start our show. If you're new here, CELPIP Live is an interactive YouTube series made to help CELPIP test takers understand more about the CELPIP test. If you're about to write the test, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as we go live. In today's episode, we're discussing part 6 of the listening section. Brandy is back and ready to guide you on listening for viewpoints. Let's go say hello to her. Hi, Brandy. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing? Did you have a nice holiday?
I did, yes. Happy New Year, Ashwati, and Happy New Year to all of our viewers. It was a different kind of holiday this year for everybody around the world, but it was still nice to have a break. It's also fun to be back for CELPIP Live.
And I could be at home in my pajamas without feeling guilty about it. So I also enjoyed my New Year holidays. So I'm going to let you get started. For those of you who were watching, if you have any questions, please ask us in the comments. Some of you already have. That's great. And if our moderator doesn't answer them for you, Brandy will answer your questions at the end of her segment. Okay, Brandy, all yours.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I'm just going to share my screen, so please give me just a minute to do that, please. Okay, so we are set to go. So yes, we are back to do some more practice with the listening sections of the CELPIP test. We're focusing today on part 6, which will ask you to listen for viewpoints. Now, there are a couple of things to mention, I guess, before we begin with today's lesson. So when you're practicing for your listening test, please remember there are 6 different parts on the CELPIP test. The audio that you're going to hear will only ever play once and once only. You can never pause it, you can't replay it. So you're going to have to listen very carefully as you hear it for the first time. The questions you're answering will always come after the audio has finished. So what that means is you're going to need to take some short but efficient notes while you're hearing the speaker talk. You will be given paper and pen at the testing centers. And with that, you're going to make your notes. And we're going to practice note-taking today. So as we're just starting into today's session, if you've got paper and pen at home, that's great. You'll be able to practice today as well. The last thing I'll mention about the listening test is that the passages are designed to get more challenging as the test progresses. So you'll notice that the vocabulary and even the ideas and the critical thinking skills required to answer those questions, they'll be more noticeably challenging on the later parts of the test as compared to, say, part 1. So we're doing part 6 today specifically, which will be, of course, the most challenging part of the CELPIP listening test. A couple things that are specific to part 6. You're going to hear only one speaker talking. There will be no visuals at all. So you're just hearing the one voice, and that person is going to deliver a report. Now, the report itself is going to be on a controversial social issue. So what that means is that the topic that's being discussed is going to evoke different reactions from other people mentioned throughout that report. Some people will support the ideas discussed, and other people are going to oppose them. So it's up to you, the listener, to realize and decide who is in favor and who is opposing the social issue. So the speaker that's talking is going to identify the people by name, and they'll usually tell you who these people are, what their job titles are. So you're going to want to listen for that type of information and then really capture the opinion that they hold. That's the whole point of listening part 6. So remember, again, you're only going to hear that report play one time. It will be about 3 minutes long. So it's going to take a little bit of concentration, I think, to get through the entire thing. You will be taking notes throughout that 3-minute segment. And we're going to practice doing that today, so you'll see exactly how it feels. Approximately 6 questions are going to appear after that audio has finished playing. And it will be your job to use your notes to help you answer the best choice from the answer list. So the answers will be pretty much multiple choice type. And we'll answer 2 practice questions today together, just to get you started. Remember one last time that listening part 6 will noticeably be the most challenging part of the CELPIP listening test. So when you begin this test and when you get to part 6, before you even hear the audio play, you will have a small introductory statement that's going to at least introduce the topic to you. So that's what you're looking at here in the blue bar on the screen. This one says you will hear a presentation about a controversial bill being proposed to reduce jail time for prisoners. So you now have a much better idea about what the speaker is going to talk about in total. As you're just getting ready to listen, it's wise then to get your pen and paper handy. I would encourage you to take notes in a chart that might look something like this. So you know that the speaker is going to tell you about at least 2 people's opinions regarding the topic. There might even be a 3rd person mentioned. So if you can create a very quick chart like this with, say, 3 columns in it, you'll have lots of space to start writing down the opinions and ideas that each person has about the topic being discussed. So hopefully you're writing this down at home right now if you wish to practice with us today. Now, a quick word about note-taking before we listen to the audio today. Because the notes or the audio rather plays all the way through without stopping, you're not going to have time to write down sentences. You probably won't even have time to write down full words all the way through your notes. Instead, what I'd encourage you to try is to find short forms or abbreviations, as well as symbols that make sense to you so that you can capture the main ideas as quickly as possible. So use point form. Point form means you're not worried about sentence structure, you're not worried about spelling, grammar, or anything like that. You're listening again for those key ideas. So I think if you can imagine answering questions to what we call the 5 W's, if you can identify who the people are that are being discussed within this report, what their opinions are, and there might be details about where they're located or when this is happening as well. Those are the types of details, I guess, that would be important. So by the time you're finished listening, the goal here is that you should be able to look at your notes and then tell the story back. If you had a friend sitting next to you for practice, you could tell the information that you just heard about using your notes as a guide. And if you can discuss all those details clearly enough that your listener has no questions for you, you'll know that you've taken efficient notes with all the right details. All right, so again, here's your chart. This is the chart that I used when I took my notes for today's practice. So what I'll ask you to do right now is we're going to listen to this lecture. Remember, it will be about 3 minutes long. Please take some notes if you'd like to practice at home. After we've heard this lecture, I'm going to show you the notes that I took, and hopefully you can compare them to the ones that you're going to take as well. Your notes are probably going to look quite different from mine, but what I'm hoping we can agree upon at least is that we have the same main details presented. All right, let's listen to this 3-minute lecture and we'll see how the note-taking goes. Here we are.
A new bill proposed by Paul Carter from the New Democratic Party is bound to stir a great deal of controversy. Mr. Carter, who represents a project called Reading for Freedom, proposes a novel way to approach jail terms. Some prisoners would be able to shorten their sentences by up to 36 days a year by reading books. Inmates in provincial prisons in Ontario would receive 3 days off their sentence for each book they finish reading. They could choose from a selection of 12 works of literature, philosophy, science, and classics, such as Shakespeare and Tolstoy. But reading alone would not be sufficient. In order to demonstrate that prisoners have read and comprehended each work, they would be required to write an essay that must make use of paragraphs, proper grammar, and spelling. Prisoners' access to the program would depend on the type of crime they committed, and also prisoners' behavioral record after incarceration. The key purpose of the project is to reduce conflict among prisoners and encourage personal development. Though innovative, the project has already met strong opposition from politicians, law enforcers, and the general public. many wonder how reading novels can genuinely prepare prisoners for real life after being reintroduced in society. They ask how reading Shakespeare could help the prisoners find jobs after prison. Finally, some, like Evelyn Breach, a political science student at University of Toronto, questioned how fair the system would be for those who are already disadvantaged. People who did not have access to proper education in the first place, or are not fluent in the English language, would not be able to read these books. This would be unfair for many Aboriginals and immigrants. According to Evelyn, the program does not give equal opportunities to everyone and could further victimize the ones whom the system has already failed. Chris Kendi, who directs the library system at penitentiaries in Ontario, is more optimistic about the project and says the main strength of the program is that it can change the prisoner's viewpoint. He says an inmate can leave prison more bitter and knowledgeable about crime, or enlightened by the world and the meaning of life. He adds that in his 20 years of experience working in prison libraries, he has seen books absolutely change people's lives, and he truly believes this program will do just that. The first reading of the provincial legislature is scheduled for Thursday, and the debate will continue in the weeks to come, when representatives from the general public and different branches of government are consulted. If the bill passes, it will come into force as early as next year across the province.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to capture some notes as you were listening. This is what my notes look like. And once again, I'm sure they do look quite different from yours, but I'm going to talk us through the notes I took. And I'd like you to compare them against yours, please, to see if you did find the same details. So we'll start with our first column. So the first viewpoint that was delivered was by a man named Paul Carter. So you'll notice here that I've captured the last name of each person that was mentioned in the lecture, all the way across. That's because in formal reports, it's the last name that is most important. I didn't take the time to write down their first names. I did throw down the first initial. And if you have a good memory, you can sometimes remember their name. But don't worry about capturing every single detail, as I say. In this case, it's the last name you're looking for. So Paul Carter, I wrote down, is affiliated with the NDP, or the New Democratic Party. So that would be a government branch. He is talking about this program to be introduced called Reading for Freedom. And the gist of this program, he says, would be to allow prisoners to reduce their prison sentences by a maximum of 36 days per year. So in other words, for every single book that these prisoners read in jail, they would get 3 days off of their sentence. I guess after these prisoners read these books, they would then be required to write an essay as well to show what they've learned. And that's how they would earn the reduction in their sentences. Now, Paul Carter was telling us that I guess not every prisoner in the system would have access to this program. He was saying it would depend on the type of crime that these prisoners committed to get into jail, as well as their behavior within the jail itself. That would determine if they were allowed to access this program. But the purpose, he tells us, is to decrease the number of fights and to increase or improve personal development among the inmates. So that's the gist of the program as introduced to us by this Paul Carter. Now, 2 other people reacted to this news. It is controversial, remember, so they're likely going to have different opinions about it. So the second person that was discussed is in column number 2 here. Her name is Evelyn Breach, and we were told that she was a student. And she's questioning this program. She wonders if it's fair. And she also worries that there might be disadvantages for certain population groups. So she says, what if people don't have access to education? Or what if their English skills are poor? Maybe they, she says, are immigrants or Aboriginals that don't have access to this education or the practice with the English skills that they need to read these books or to write essays. So she's saying that these people then would not have equal opportunities and instead would practically be victimized by the system. So it sounds like she's opposing this program. She does not agree with it whatsoever. The third and final person that this report talked about was a man by the name of Chris Kendi, and he was a director of the library prison. So he sees this program as creating positive change. He thinks that prisoners will be enlightened. He's been working as the director of the library in the prison for about 20 years, and he says that he has seen firsthand how books can change lives. So it sounds like he's actually supporting this program in the jail system. Now, right below that, at the bottom of my Viewpoint 3 column, you'll notice I just drew a little blue bar, and I wrote down a couple of extra bulleted points. This was just the conclusion of the lecture itself. So I heard the speaker tell us that this proposed project, I guess, is going to be discussed on Thursday. They're going to do a bill reading. And if it passes, the public and the government are going to consult upon it. If this law becomes actually official law, it will come into place next year all the way across the province. So those were the details that I could discern, again, as I listened through that lecture. I'm hoping that you've got similar details as well. At the very least, you should have the people that were talked about and understand firmly what their opinions or their viewpoints are about the main topic discussed. Now, before we get into some practice questions, I did want to show you a little bit about how the details come from the lecture itself and how they look when they're translated into your notes. So remember, on your CELPIP test, you're never going to have a transcript for any listening activity. On the real test, you're going to listen, take notes, and answer questions. But because we're practicing and studying together today in session, I wanted to show you part of the transcript. So in this blue box, we can see the words that the speaker was actually talking about. So this paragraph here represents the first part of Paul Carter's discussion, who introduced the project to us. So all of those yellow highlighted sections represent the details that I gathered and inserted into my notes in the chart below. So I guess the point I'm trying to emphasize is look at how short my notes are compared to all of the words and sentences that I highlighted above. When you're taking notes, your notes should be no longer than, say, 1/3 of the original length of the lecture itself. You won't have much time for more than that length. So this represents the first part of Paul Carter's introduction. And then this would be the second part of the project introduction. So again, you can see how much information there was taken from the transcript. All of those yellow highlighted sections represent the main details. And you can see how short and concise those ideas look like when they're written down into the chart below. So once again, you would like to find a balance. You need those ideas, but you need also to write them down quickly. So experiment with your own note-taking styles to find a way that works for you, as long as you can make sense of the ideas once you're reading them back. So we're going to use the notes that we've taken today to answer 2 practice questions from a past CELPIP test. And as we're getting ready to do that, I'll remind you that there are 3 different types of questions that you might encounter as you're answering. So the first type would be a general meaning type question. These are really big picture ideas. So a very common question would be, what is the main topic of this report? That asks you to consider the gist or the big picture idea. The second type of question here, these specific information questions, these are just the opposite. They focus your attention down on one detail. So you might be asked about one person's opinion regarding the topic, for example. So you'd have to know where to look for that answer in the notes that you've made. The other type of question are called inference questions. So these answers to these types of questions are not actually stated directly in the lecture itself. Instead, what you would need to do is use all of the information you've learned and then draw your best conclusion. Looking at the 4 answer choices, you would choose the answer that makes the best sense based on what you've learned throughout the passage. So sometimes knowing what type of question you're answering is actually going to help you figure out where you're going to find your answer. So let's practice that now and see how we do together. So remember, these questions they were once from a real CELPIP test in the past. So it gives you just a really good sense of the level of complexity that you need to prepare for. So let's read the question out loud together, and I'll give you a few moments to try to guess the answer, and then we'll talk about the answer together. So right away, the question says, this story is about a, right away, I know this is a general meaning question. We're looking for a big picture idea here. So the answers are A, a law that forces prisoners to read books. B, a proposed law to reduce some prisoners' sentences. C, a man who spent 36 days reading books in prison, and D, a project that teaches prisoners to read and write. So I'm going to give you 7 or 8 seconds even to make your choice at home. Feel free to type your letter guess into the live chat there, or you can just think about it at home. Okay, so hopefully you're whittling down those choices. We're going to talk about them now to make sure that everybody understands what the right answer is and why. So before we even look at our notes, I'm going to suggest that right off the top, we can eliminate answer A. Answer A talks about a law that forces people to read. Now, first of all, the whole point of this speaker or this report was telling us about a proposed project that needed to be discussed and consulted. And if passed, it would become law. So right now, no official law exists. So we can eliminate answer A right off the top. And we're left now with 3 possible answer choices. So when we look at the other choices, if I had to pick one on instinct right now without even looking at my notes, I'm strongly leaning towards answer B. This one's talking about a proposed law, which is what this viewpoint was all about. It's a project that might become law someday. And it mentions it's talking about reducing some prisoners' sentences. I'm pretty sure that's the answer. But when I look at C and D, I'm a bit nervous because I notice details that I remember recording in my notes. So in answer C, I see something about 36 days. And I know I wrote that down in my notes. And in answer D, I'm seeing things about prisoners that need to read and write. And once again, I remember writing that in my notes. So before I confidently select answer B, I'm going to take about 20 seconds to consult my notes and make sure I'm correct. So remember, I'm looking for the big picture idea. I'm looking for the general topic idea. And because Mr. Paul Carter was the one who introduced the topic to us, it would make best sense to actually consult this topic or this viewpoint in the chart. So as we skim read really quickly what we've written there, we see that he's talking about this program about freedom that allows prisoners to reduce their sentences by 36 days. Okay, so that eliminates for me then answer C. This topic is not about one man who read for 36 days. It's about all prisoners who could be reading and something to do with a reduced prison sentence. Now, the idea I wrote down about writing essays, remember the prisoners will be asked to read and write in order to gain their freedom. So again, when I look at my answer choices, the best answer choice still is B. The whole project, Reading for Freedom, will allow these prisoners to have a reduced sentence. And it's a proposed idea. So I'm going to confidently now select answer B now that I've just double checked, and I can move on to the next question. So question 2 reads, critics argue that the project, before I even look at the answer choices, I know now that I'm looking at a specific detailed question. So I guess to answer this question right away, you need to understand who the critic really is. So let's look at our answer choices first, and then we'll talk it through. So what are critics arguing about? Is it A, that they should focus more on recent literature? B, it penalizes those with poor English skills? C, the project creates conflict between the educated and uneducated? And D, the project only helps prisoners find jobs if they've read Shakespeare. I don't remember hearing about Shakespeare, so that's probably not right, but I'll let you decide. Can you take about 7 or 8 seconds even to come up with your first instinct? What answer do you feel is correct? Feel free to type in a guess if you'd like into the live chat. All right, let's have a little look here and see how it goes. So remember, there are 3 people involved in this conversation. We're looking for the critic. So right off the top, I'm going to eliminate Paul Carter from consideration because he's the one that introduced the bill. So he's not disagreeing with anything. He's just giving us information about what this bill is all about. When I look at the 2 remaining people here, I see that Evelyn Breach, she questions the fairness of this bill. whereas Chris Kendi sees this project as one evoking positive change. So it's obvious to me here that it's Evelyn Breach, our student, who is the critic. She's the one that's disagreeing with or opposing the proposed bill. So let's just quickly review the notes we made about her so that we can understand what her ideas are around this project. So remember, she is really worried about the disadvantages that are created for people that either can't access education or don't have really strong English skills. So in other words, she's saying, how can somebody read a book and write an essay about it if they don't have those skills in the first place? It's not fair, is her point. So when we go back to the 4 answer choices, there are 2 that we can eliminate right away. Answers A and D don't make any sense here. Evelyn Breach does not talk about wanting more recent literature, and she doesn't even mention Shakespeare. So right away, we can narrow down our answer selection to 2 choices here. So looking at the 2 remaining choices, answer C does mention uneducated groups of people, which sort of addresses the point she was making. But answer C here talks about conflict that exists between people who are educated and uneducated. And that's not quite accurate. Really what Evelyn Breach's point is that people that don't have strong English skills will be at a disadvantage. And another way of saying that they have a disadvantage is saying that they are being penalized for not having these skills. So we're matching up those 2 words, penalized and disadvantage, to create the meaning that we need to understand this question. So we can more confidently now select answer B as the correct one, and we would move on in the test. So we've answered 2 questions. Remember, there would be 6 altogether for part 6, but we'll leave it at that for today. And hopefully you've got some ideas there as you continue to practice at home. So let's just review, I guess, what we did today to give you some strategies to lead with. Remember that for all of your listening parts, you're only ever going to hear the audio play once only. So this is why we need to take notes while we're listening. Try to get down those main details because you'll use those to answer the questions later. When you're taking notes, find a way to keep them short but efficient. Use initials, use short forms, use symbols, whatever works for you in the moment. And then the questions, of course, come afterwards. And that's what you're going to use, your notes, in order to answer them. Sometimes knowing what type of question you're answering is actually helpful. It'll help you know where to look for the answer in your notes. So remember, the first question we practiced today was a general meaning question. And that pointed us towards the first column of our chart because Paul Carter there was introducing the project in the first place. It just made sense to go there for the information about the topic. In our second practice question today, we were talking about the critic, and we determined right away that that was Evelyn Breach. So we focused our attention only on that column in the chart. So that again is going to save you time when you know exactly where to look in your notes to help you find the answer. So once you've narrowed it down, you will select the best answer from the list. It's always helpful to eliminate answers that don't make sense. Even when you think you know the correct answer, I would encourage you just to take another, say, 15 seconds even, to quickly read over the other answer choices and eliminate them as faulty so that you're extra confident you've chosen wisely. And last but not least, you might be short on time or you really might not know the answer to a question. And if that is the case, please just guess. Take a wild guess. If you guess correctly, you'll get lucky and get a point for that question. If you get it wrong, you simply just won't get any points at all, but you're not going to be penalized. All right, if you leave anything blank, you'll automatically receive no points. So the best strategy as a last resort would be to take a guess and maybe you'll get it right after all. So I'll leave it at that today. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here so that I can come back to all of you. And if you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to try to answer them now as we go.
Hi, Brandy. We don't have any questions yet. I'm still waiting for them, but I will say that quite a few people were guessing right. They were able to follow your instructions. Some of them, so for example, one of our commentators did have trouble deciding between B and C for the last one. It was a little confusing, if I do say so myself, but I think the key is in the words, like the critic being one word and then penalizing being another word. So I think it's important also to be a little aware of vocabulary. Okay, so we do have a question here. When we finish all parts in listening, will the test go to reading on its own, or do we have to click next to go to the next part?
Right. So if you do finish the listening part a little bit early and you have a few seconds remaining on the clock, you could click the next button and just advance right over to the reading part of the test if you wanted to. Alternatively, if you just waited till the counter clock reached 0, the computer is going to automatically move you forward anyway. So either way, it's fine. Just again, remember that if you click that next button, you can never go back again. There's no back button. So my concern with clicking next is if you get to the next part and you realize you've made a mistake, it's then too late to go back and change it. So I think even if you have a little bit of extra time, it's a nice idea to read back over the questions and answer choices that you've made. So you're double checking, and then you'll feel confident. If you've made a mistake, you might catch it there, right? So it's probably, especially with part 6 being more challenging, it's more advisable, I think, to use all the time the test gives you. But again, it's up to you. If you do want to skip over those last few seconds, you could click next and advance. That would be fine too.
Okay, so our next question, are the questions in chronological order always?
Yeah, for the most part, the questions will be delivered in the same order as the lecture itself. Now, keep in mind, there are some questions like inference questions that might rely on you understanding the entire passage in order to come up with the answer. So in that case, it would be impossible to put that type of a question in an exact order. But as far as these general meaning or specific detail questions, they tend to follow the same order as the lecture that's being presented. So that's one strategy. But I think too, your notes themselves will be more valuable to you to help point you towards the right answer. So again, if you're organizing the different viewpoints presented in different columns in a chart, when you understand which person it is you're supposed to be focusing on, that's the area that you're going to go to help you answer that question. So that would be a really nice way to do it instead of relying on memory about when did I hear this in the speech? You know, use your notes, trust your notes more so than the order of the lecture, I think.
Great. Okay, so I think we don't have any more questions. But thank you, Brandy, for that presentation and your lesson. As always, a lot of people who joined wanting to learn something about the listening test specifically. So this was a very timely episode. Thank you so much. Okay, last question, swooping in. Can we go back and review all the answers at the end of the test?
Now, do you mean, I'm assuming you mean at the end of the entire CELPIP test, or do you mean the end of?
Well, let's answer both, I guess. And like, can we go back and check our listening section questions after we finish the listening part? And then can the same thing happen with the entire?
You can only check the answers for the part that you're working on. So say today we were in part 6. You have right up until the counter clock reaches 0 in that part 6 to double check your answers just for part 6 and make any changes that you want. As soon as you move on to the next part, you can't go back whatsoever. So again, let's just pretend you've done part 1 of the listening test and now you're working on part 2. You can never go back to part 1 now that you've started part 2. So as I say, the test will just continuously push you through. The only part you'll be able to double check is the specific part you're working on, and you'll only be able to make changes until that counter clock reaches 0. So that's a really good thing to know as you're doing this test. Keeps you focused on that one part at a time.
Great. Thank you, Brandy, for joining us and giving us your time. We will see you soon. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Have a great day, a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Okay, so that was Brandy with her amazing lessons. And some of you are asking questions about score rubrics, and I will say that they are on our website. It's called score comparison chart, which is a chart that you can download and print if you want to learn more about how CELPIP is scored. But they also have sample answers, which I think is hugely beneficial for people who are trying to understand what makes something a CELPIP level 12 answer versus what makes something a CELPIP level 11 answer. So do check it out. It's called the score comparison chart on our website, but it does have more than just a chart. That's what I was trying to say. So thank you guys for asking your questions, some really good questions. And for those of you who are trying to learn about taking notes, if you go back to our previous episodes with Brandy, a lot of them are about note taking. And when you are watching those episodes, please make sure to have a paper and pencil near you so you can practice how to take good notes. Okay, that's it for today, but I haven't forgotten our trivia question. The question was, what kind of pizza was invented in Canada? And I think one of you answered right. It is the Hawaiian pizza. So congratulations for answering it right. And it was invented in 1962 by Sam Panopoulos, who was a Canadian. Thank you for joining us and subscribing to our channel. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone else you think might find it useful. If you have any friends or family who are giving the CELPIP test in the future, our next episode will be on Jan 26th. If you have questions you couldn't get answered today, please comment below or send us an email at communications@paragontesting.ca, and we can also address it on our next episode. You can also suggest topics that you would like to see on our show, anything you'd like to learn about the CELPIP test. Lastly, please connect with us through any of our social media channels. All updates will be posted there first, especially if you're looking for any sale discounts that we have on products. We usually talk about that on social media first, so do consider following us. And if you have any questions, you can also send us a DM on social media. We're always pretty active there, and you will eventually get a reply. So until our next episode, please take care and stay safe. Bye.